The sky over Arizona was the color of old blood. It was the year 1872, and the land itself seemed weary of the war. Out here on the border, the fighting between the Apache and the settlers had no clean edges. It was a raw, festering wound that refused to close. The high desert air, thin and sharp as a new knife, carried the smell of alkali dust, horse sweat, and something older, something like fear. Wind was the only constant. It sculpted the red rock into gargoyles and moaned through the skeletal ribs of saguaro cacti. It stirred the dust devils that danced across the sun-baked flats. And it carried the high, circling patience of the vultures. They were always there, black specks wheeling against the brassy sun, waiting for the next wagon train, the next cavalry patrol, or the next failed dream. Just yesterday, they had feasted on the remains of a freight wagon. Its cargo of flour and whiskey spilled across the rocks, its team long gone, its driver marked only by the dark stain on the ground and a few charred spokes pointing toward the sky. This was the world Clara Monroe had chosen. She had come to Fort Bowie with a trunk full of medical texts from Boston and a belief in saving lives that now seemed dangerously naive. Fort Bowie was not a place for ideals. It was a collection of dusty adobe buildings and rough-hewn timber barracks, crouched behind a low wall, clinging to the side of a canyon. It was an island of blue uniforms in a vast, hostile ocean of red rock. Life here was coarse. It tasted of gritty coffee, stale bread, and cheap whiskey from the sutler's store. The men were hard, their faces leathered by the sun, their humor as bleak as the landscape. They gambled, they fought, they drank, and they died. Clara, with her pale eastern skin that she tried to protect under a wide-brimmed hat, and her quiet, determined hands, was an anomaly. She was the post nurse, a position that earned her a sliver of respect in a mountain of isolation. The other woman on the post was the colonel's wife, who spent her days indoors, nursing headaches and writing letters back east. Clara's domain was the infirmary. It was a long, low building that smelled of carbolic acid, lye soap, and the sweet, sick odor of gangrene. She worked under Dr. Elias Thorne, a man who had seen too much war and found his only solace in a laudanum bottle. Most days, she was the one setting the bones, stitching the flesh, and whispering comfort to men delirious with fever. She had come here to heal, to do good in a place that desperately needed it. She had not understood, until she arrived, that doing good had very specific, military-defined boundaries. The boundary was the Apache. To the soldiers, he was a ghost, a redskin, a savage. He was the shadow that watched from the ridgeline, the sudden arrow in the dark, the reason for the extra cartridge in the revolver. But Tala Redhawk was not a ghost. He was a man. He lived and breathed the air of the Dragoon Mountains, a fortress of granite and shadow that the cavalry had failed to penetrate. He was a warrior, but he was also the survivor of a massacre that had stolen his family and burned his past to the ground. The scars on his body, hidden beneath his buckskin shirt, were a map of that history, a map of loss, of white man's prisons, and of a rage that burned as cold and steady as a star in the winter sky. He watched the fort, he watched the patrols. He lived off the land, moving with a silence that the white man mistook for magic. He was alone, an outcast by choice from the scattered bands of his own people, for he carried a grief too heavy to share. He was hunting, not just for food, but for something he could not name, a purpose, or perhaps just an ending. The ending almost found him on a Tuesday. The day had been brutal, the heat pressing down like a physical weight. The air in the fort was thick and stale. Payday had been 2 days prior, and the whiskey was still flowing. Clara was walking from the infirmary back to her small quarters, a tin plate of stew balanced in her hands. She was tired, her shoulders aching. The sun was finally dipping, painting the western sky in those bloody, violent strokes of orange and purple. That was when she heard the shouting. It was not the usual barracks noise. This had an edge, a raw, cruel sound that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. She followed the sound to the open square near the stables. A group of 7, maybe 8 soldiers, their blue uniforms stained with sweat and dirt, were clustered around the big cottonwood tree that served as the post's unofficial gallows. They were drunk. She could smell the sour odor of it from 20 feet away. And they had a prize. He was Apache. There was no mistaking it. He was tall, even when hunched with his hands bound behind him. He wore only a breechcloth and worn moccasins. His black hair hung long and straight, matted with dirt. His skin was the color of burnished copper. His muscles coiled and tense. A rope was already around his neck, the other end slung over a thick branch. "A good night's work, boys," shouted a corporal with a heavy mustache. "Found this one skulking by the spring. Let's see how high a redskin can dance." A cheer went up. One of the men grabbed the end of the rope, ready to haul. Clara's plate clattered to the ground. The stew splashed in the dust. She did not even notice. "Stop!" Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the drunken haze. The soldiers turned. Their faces were flushed, amused, annoyed. "Well, looky here. It's the Angel of Mercy," sneered the corporal. "This ain't your business, nurse. This is soldier's work." "You are hanging an unarmed man," Clara said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. She stepped forward. "That is not soldier's work. It is murder." "He's Apache, ma'am," another soldier said, as if that explained everything. "He'd as soon cut your throat as look at you." "And you are soldiers of the United States Army," she retorted, her eyes flashing. "Not a lynch mob. Now cut him down." The corporal laughed. "Or what, little lady, you gonna stitch us to death?" He took a step toward her, his bulk menacing. "Go on back to your pills and powders." "Corporal, what is the meaning of this?" The voice was like cracked ice. Lieutenant Howard. He was young, ambitious, and he held a particular, unrequited fondness for Clara. He was also a man who valued discipline above all else. The soldiers snapped to a clumsy, drunken attention. "Sir," the corporal stammered, We just caught this hostile." Howard's gaze swept the scene. He saw the rope, the prisoner, and finally, Clara. His face tightened. "And you decided to dispense justice yourselves without a trial, without authority?" He was not angry about the Apache. He was angry about the breach of conduct. "He's just a redskin, sir," the corporal muttered. "He is a prisoner, and he will be dealt with by the colonel," Howard said sharply. "Not by you. Cut him down." The men, sobered by the lieutenant's presence, grumbled but obeyed. A knife flashed, and the rope around the Apache's neck fell away. Tala Redhawk had not moved. He had not pleaded. He had prepared himself for the snap of his neck, for the blackness. He had focused his hatred on the blurred, shouting faces, feeding his spirit for the journey to the other side. Then he heard her voice, a woman's, white. It was a fly buzzing at the moment of his death, irritating, irrelevant. But the buzzing had stopped the hand on the rope. Now, he stood free, though his hands were still bound. The rope burns on his neck stung. He raised his head slowly. He looked past the soldiers, past the officer, and his eyes found her. Clara met his gaze. She had expected to see animal rage, or perhaps the blank terror of a man facing death. She saw neither. What she saw was an intelligence so sharp and cold it terrified her. It was bottomless. It was a well of pure, unadulterated hatred. He looked at her as if she were a species of insect he had not yet classified, but found repulsive. And yet, beneath the hate, she saw something else, a flicker of something. It was not gratitude. It was surprise. It was a raw, burning curiosity that matched her own. He was looking at her, really seeing her, not as a woman, but as a thing, a puzzle. Why had she done it? She, in turn, saw the man, not the hostile. She saw the high, proud cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw, the faint silvering of old scars on his chest. He was not a savage. He was a man, And he was beautiful, in the way a panther is beautiful. Dangerous, perfect. The moment stretched. The desert wind blew between them, carrying the smell of the coming night. Howard, oblivious, cleared his throat. "Nurse Monroe, please return to your quarters. This is a military matter." Tala's eyes never left hers. Not until two soldiers grabbed his arms. He did not fight them. He simply went, a king being led by fools. As they dragged him toward the stockade, he looked back once, not at her, at the mountains, his home. "You were a fool." Dr. Thorne did not look up from the letter he was writing. He was in his office, the laudanum bottle half empty on his desk. Clara stood before him, having been summoned. "You interfered with military discipline," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "You embarrassed those men, and for what?" "They were going to kill him, Doctor." "He is the enemy," Thorne said, finally looking up. His eyes were milky, tired. "They are all the enemy. Have you forgotten the reports the ranchers found last month, the children from that wagon train?" "I am a nurse," Clara said, her hands clenched. "My duty is to life, not to a uniform, not to a side." "That," Thorne said, dipping his pen in the ink, "is a luxury we cannot afford out here. Miss Monroe, you saved a wolf. Do not be surprised when he returns for the sheep. You are confined to the infirmary and your quarters for 3 days, to reflect on your duties." Clara turned and left. The reprimand was sharp, but it was the isolation that stung more. As she crossed the compound, the soldiers she passed, men whose wounds she had tended, turned their heads. They would not meet her eyes. She was the squaw doctor, the one who had saved the enemy. Tala Redhawk did not stay in the stockade for 3 days. He did not even stay for 3 hours. The stockade was built to hold drunken soldiers, not an Apache warrior. The lock was old, the wood rotten. By midnight, he was gone. He melted into the rocks of the canyon, a shadow among shadows. The alarms rang, but they were a joke. The soldiers might as well have been chasing the wind. Clara heard the bells from her small cabin. She lay awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, listening to the shouts and the pounding boots. She felt a strange, cold relief. He was gone. The wolf was free. She did not know if she had done the right thing, but she knew she could not have done anything else. She must have slept. When she woke, the fort was quiet. The sun was not yet up, but the first gray light of dawn filtered through her window. She rose to light her small stove, to make coffee, and she saw it. It was lying on her doorstep, just inside the threshold, as if placed there by a hand that did not need to open the door. It was an arrow, simple, fletched with hawk feathers, but tied just above the sinew wrapping was a small, torn piece of white silk. It was fine, finer than anything in this fort. It looked like it had come from a lady's dress. Clara picked it up. Her fingers trembled. It was not a threat. She knew that, instinctively. A threat would have been in her wall, or in her chest. This was a token, a message. He had been here. He had stood right outside her door while she slept. He could have killed her. He had left this instead. She held the arrow, the smooth wood cool against her palm. She did not know the sign for a blood debt forgiven. She only knew that a man who hated her, a man who had every reason to hate her, had spared her. She looked out the window, toward the towering, silent peaks of the Dragoon Mountains. The first ray of sun hit the highest peak, setting it on fire, down in the compound. The bugler sounded reveille. A new day was beginning. But for Clara Monroe and for Tala Redhawk, the world had shifted. The war now had a face, and the space between two souls, two enemies, had been crossed by a single, silent gesture. The arrow changed nothing, and it changed everything. Clara hid the small, silk-bound token in the bottom of her medical text trunk, beneath her heaviest books. It felt like a hot coal in her hand, a secret that could burn the fort to the ground. In the days that followed, the chill she had felt from the soldiers became a solid wall of ice. They had given her a name. She heard it whispered when she crossed the parade ground, a soldier muttering it to another, his hand covering his mouth. "Squaw doctor." The name followed her to the mess hall, where the men at her usual table would suddenly find reason to leave, taking their tin plates with them. It followed her to the infirmary, where even the patients seemed wary of her. One private, his leg shattered by a fall, had flinched when she came to change his dressing. "Don't need no Apache magic, ma'am," he had muttered, his eyes wide with a mix of fever and superstition. Lieutenant Howard was the exception. He went out of his way to be courteous, to stop and inquire after her health, his voice loud enough for others to hear. It was a misplaced, clumsy chivalry that only made things worse. It painted her as his protectee, which, in the harsh calculus of the fort, made her seem even weaker. Clara met his kindness with a polite, brittle coldness. She did not want his protection. She did not know what she wanted. Dr. Thorne simply ignored her. Save for the necessary orders, he had retreated deeper into his laudanum haze, leaving Clara to manage the dysentery outbreak that had struck the laundry women. She worked from sun-up to sundown, her hands raw from lye soap and carbolic, her mind numb. The isolation was a kind of high, thin ache, like the keening of the wind over the canyon walls. She began to feel more like the Apache than the soldiers. She, too, was an outsider, watched and distrusted. She started to pay more attention to the land beyond the walls. She watched the way the light changed on the Dragoon Mountains, the way the hawks hunted on the thermals. She felt, for the first time, a kinship with the vast, unforgiving emptiness. It was perhaps a week after the hanging, maybe more. The days blurred into one another. A dry heat had settled on the post, and the air was thick with the promise of a storm that never came. Clara was in her cabin, too tired to sleep, too restless to read. It was late. The moon was a pale sliver, offering almost no light. The fort was silent, save for the distant stamp of a horse in the stables and the lonely tread of the sentry on the wall. She was brushing her hair, the 100 strokes her mother had insisted on, when she felt it, a change in the air, a cold draft that had not been there a second before. She froze, her hand and the brush halfway to her head. He was standing by the door. The door was closed. It was barred. Yet he was inside. Clara did not scream. The breath simply locked in her throat. He was a cutout of absolute darkness against the faint light of her single candle. He was taller than she remembered, filling the small space of her room with a presence that felt like a predator. She could see the faint glint of his eyes in the gloom. He made no move. He just stood there, watching her. "How?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Your door is loud," he said. His voice was not, it was low, like rocks grinding together deep under the earth. The man on the wall walks the same path. He looks south for 10 breaths and north for 10. You are poorly guarded. She stood up slowly, her dressing gown a thin white shield. The brush fell from her hand, hitting the wooden floor with a dull thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. "What do you want?" He took a step. She saw that he was gaunt, his ribs showing faintly under his copper skin. He looked tired. "You saved my life." Yes. "Why?" The question hung in the air. Clara had no answer, not one that would make sense to him. "They were drunk. It was wrong." He made a small sound, almost a laugh, but with no humor in it. "Wrong. The white man brings many new words. My people are being hunted, and your officer calls it wrong. It is a small word." "What do you want?" she asked again, pulling the neck of her gown tighter. "You have a debt. I have paid it." He gestured to the floor, as if he knew where she had hidden the arrow. "Now, I give you a gift." He moved again, flowing out of the shadows and toward her small window. He pointed. "You see the low pass? There." She joined him, keeping a careful distance. She looked out. The mountains were a black, jagged line against the starry sky. I see rocks. Tomorrow, 3 hours after the sun is at its highest, 10, maybe 12 men, they ride from the north, not soldiers. What? Bounty hunters, from Tucson. They have paper that promises them gold for Apache scalps. He said the word scalps with a cold flatness. They know where a small band is hidden. Old men, women, children. They plan to collect. Clara felt a cold sickness in her stomach. You know this. How? I hear the wind, he said. And the wind hears the stupid boasts of white men in cantinas. They will ride through that pass. He turned his head, his eyes fixing on her. They will be slaughtered. The families. I mean, not the hunters. My God, she whispered. You must tell someone. I am. He said it without irony. Me. The absurdity of it hit her. What can I do? I am a woman, a nurse. You are the squaw doctor, he said, using the name without malice. As a simple fact, you stopped 8 soldiers. Perhaps you can stop 12 hunters. The colonel, she began. Your colonel signed the scalp papers. His name is at the bottom. He offers $50 for a warrior, 20 for a woman, 10 for a child. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled back, feeling for her chair. No, that is a lie. You have a horse, Tala said, ignoring her protest. I have seen you ride it. You can ride north. You can warn them. Warn who? The soldiers? The hunters, he said, a flicker of impatience in his voice. Tell them their plan is known. Tell them the Apache warriors are waiting. Tell them anything. You lie well, like all white people. And if I do not? Then the blood of those children will be on your hands, as well as his. He pointed at her, his finger a rigid spear. Clara looked down at her hands, half expecting to see them stained red. Why me? Why trust me? You saved my life, he said again, as if it were the answer to everything. You had no reason. You gained nothing. You lost much. He glanced around her small, bare room. You are not like them. He turned and was at the door. Wait, she called. He paused. How will I find them? You will not, he said, but they will find you. Ride north of the pass. Make a fire. They will come. And then, as if the shadows had simply reclaimed him, he was gone. The bar was still on the door. The night was silent again. But the room was full of his smell, of smoke and dust, and the wild, clean scent of the high rocks. Clara did not sleep. She sat in her chair, the cold seeping into her bones, her mind a warring, chaotic battlefield. He had lied. The colonel could not sanction such a thing. It was murder. And yet she thought of the ranchers found without their hair. She thought of the hate-filled faces of the soldiers. She thought of the casual cruelty of this land. If she went to the colonel, what would she say that a ghost had appeared in her room? An Apache, the escaped prisoner? She would be locked in the infirmary, or sent back east on the next supply wagon as a lunatic. If she did nothing, the children, 10 for a child. Her conscience, the very thing that had brought her west, was now a trap. To obey her orders, to be loyal to the fort, was to be complicit in a massacre. To follow her conscience was to betray everything she was supposed to represent. It was treason. The bugle call for dawn was a violation. It shattered the stillness, calling the world back to its ugly, sharp-edged reality. Clara had made her choice. She reported to the infirmary as usual. She changed dressings, dispensed quinine, and forced broth down the throat of the feverish private. Dr. Thorne was in his office. His door closed at noon. She ate her small meal of hardtack and salt pork, her stomach churning. At 1 o'clock, she went to the stables. The stable hand was a young private who still had pimples. I need my horse. Private, she said, her voice calm. Ma'am. I am going to the creek to gather herbs." It was a flimsy excuse, but the best she had. The private looked nervous. "Lieutenant Howard left orders. Ma'am, that you are not to leave the fort." "Lieutenant Howard is not my commander. Private. Dr. Thorne is, and he has given me permission." It was a flat lie. The boy wavered. She was an officer, in her own way. He was just a private. He sighed and went to saddle her mare, a small, sturdy buckskin. She rode out of the main gate. The sentry nodded to her. He had seen her go on her herb-gathering trips before. She kept the horse to a slow walk until the fort was a small, dusty square behind her. Then she urged the mare into a canter, heading north, toward the low pass in the hills. The land was empty, vast. She felt terribly small, a single white speck against the enormous red canvas. She found the pass, just as he had described it. She rode a mile past it, into a small arroyo. There, she dismounted. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely strike a match. She gathered dry brush, and soon a thin, greasy plume of smoke was rising into the still afternoon air. She waited. For an hour, nothing, just the buzz of insects and the thud of her own heart. Then they came, not from the pass, but from the rocks above her. 12 of them. Hard men with harder eyes. They were not soldiers. They wore mismatched clothes, their belts heavy with pistols and knives. A few had ugly, fresh scalps hanging from their saddle horns. The leader was a big man with a beard the color of dried blood. He spurred his horse forward, stopping just yards from her. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. Well, what we got here." His eyes roamed over her, and Clara felt suddenly naked. "You lost, little lady?" "No," Clara said, her voice high. "I am here to warn you." The man laughed. "Warn us." "The Apache, they know you are coming. They are waiting for you. It is a trap." The man's amusement vanished. His eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" I heard." "You heard?" He dismounted, his boots heavy on the ground. He walked toward her, coiling his horse's reins in his hand. "You hear things, do you? You in league with them redskins? Is that it? Are you the squaw doctor from Bowie?" Clara's blood ran cold. He knew her. "We heard about you," the man said, his voice soft and dangerous. "The one who likes the red men so much." He was very close now. She could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Maybe you like us, too." He reached for her. A sound like a whip crack echoed through the arroyo. The man's head snapped back. A small, dark hole appeared in his forehead. He stood there for a second, his face a mask of stupid surprise. And then he crumpled into the dust. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the world exploded. Gunfire erupted from the rocks above. Arrows hissed through the air. The bounty hunters, caught in the open, panicked. Horses screamed and reared. Men shouted, firing blindly. Clara dove behind her mare as 2 more hunters fell from their saddles. She saw him then. Tala. He was on a ledge, his rifle in his hands, firing with a calm, deadly precision. He was not alone. 5, maybe 6 other Apache warriors were with him, appearing and disappearing like spirits among the rocks. It was an ambush. He had lied. He had not sent her to warn the hunters. He had sent her to bait the trap. The realization was a punch to the gut. She was a tool, a piece of bait. The fight was over in minutes. The bounty hunters were not soldiers. They were greedy, and they were cowards. The survivors, 4 of them, turned their horses and fled, riding hard for the open desert. Tala and his men did not pursue. They came down from the rocks, moving with a fluid, terrifying grace. They began to check the bodies, collecting weapons. Clara was shaking, her knees weak. Her mare was pulling at the reins, wild-eyed. Tala walked toward her. His face was a mask. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the dead man at her feet. Then at her. "You came," he said. "You lied to me!" she screamed, the hysteria rising. "You used me! You made me a part of this killing!" "You are alive," he said flatly. "They are dead. The children are safe. That is the truth. I am going back." She fumbled for her saddle. "No." She turned. "What do you mean? No, I am leaving." "The soldiers from the fort," he said, pointing back the way she had come. A column of dust was rising, still miles away, but coming fast. They heard the gunfire. "They are coming." "Good," Clara cried. They are my people." "Are they?" Tala's voice was laced with contempt. "Will you tell them you rode out to meet the squaw doctor, that you were the bait for an Apache ambush, or will you tell them you were taken a prisoner?" Clara stared at him, the horror of her situation crashing down. He was right. Howard, the soldiers, they would see her here, with him, with the dead bounty hunters. They would never believe her. She would be a traitor. "You cannot—" "They will hang you," Tala said simply. "Or him." He nodded at his men. "Or me. They do not care. They only care about the color of the skin. Come." He grabbed the reins of her horse. "No, I will not. Let me go." She hit his chest with her fists, but it was like hitting a rock wall. He did not even flinch. He just looked at her, and his eyes were tired. "Woman," he said, "you have 10 seconds to get on that horse and ride with me, or I will leave you here for your soldiers." "And they," he said, his gaze turning to the approaching dust, "are not in a merciful mood." She looked at the dust cloud. She looked at the dead men. She looked at this impossible, savage man. She had no choice. She had no choice at all. She put her foot in the stirrup and hauled herself onto the mare. "Ride," he commanded, "and do not fall behind." He leaped onto his own pony, and they were off, riding hard into the labyrinth of red rock, leaving the soldiers, the fort, and her entire life behind. They rode for hours, until the horses were lathered and Clara's legs burned. They did not stop until the sun was gone and the moon was high. They were deep in a canyon, a narrow slit in the earth called Salt Creek. The walls were so high they blocked out the stars. Tala finally called a halt. Clara slid from the saddle, her legs collapsing under her. She lay on the cold sand, gasping. "Get up," he said. "I cannot." "Get up." He pulled her to her feet roughly. "We must be higher." He half dragged, half carried her up a narrow trail to a small cave, barely a hollow in the rock. Their horses were left below, hidden in a thicket of willow. "We are safe here," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "No," he said. "We are only hidden, for now." He lit a small, smokeless fire, using a drill and a piece of dry wood. The small flame cast huge, dancing shadows, and it was in that flickering light that she saw he was hurt. A dark stain was spreading across his left shoulder. He had been shot. "You are wounded," she breathed. "It is nothing." He turned away from her, his back rigid. "Do not be a fool," she snapped, her nurse's training taking over, cutting through her fear and her anger. "Let me see it." "No. I am a nurse. You brought me here. The least you can do is let me stop you from bleeding to death. Now, sit down." To her amazement, he hesitated, and then he sat. He gritted his teeth as he shrugged out of his buckskin shirt. Clara gasped. The firelight played over his back and shoulders. It was a roadmap of brutality. Old scars, long and white, from a whip, crisscrossed his back, but there was more. On his right shoulder, there was a puckered, star-shaped burn. "A brand," she whispered, her hand rising to her mouth. His head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "Do not," he said, his voice a low growl. "Do not look." "It is a U.S. brand," she said, her voice numb, "from a military prison." His hatred of her pity was a physical thing. It radiated from him, hotter than the fire. "The bullet," he bit out, "or I will do it myself." Clara took a breath. She pushed down the pity. She pushed down the horror. She became the nurse again. "The bullet is still in. It went in the back of the shoulder. It is deep. I have to get it out." "Then get it out." I have nothing. My medical bag is at the fort." He grunted, then reached for his own leather pouch. He pulled out a long, wicked-looking knife. "This," he said, "and this." He handed her a small flask of whiskey. "I cannot," she said. "This is—" "You will," he said, "or I will die, and they will find you here with my body, and they will take you. Do it." She looked at the knife. She looked at his back, at the raw, bleeding hole. She took the flask, uncorked it, and poured a stream of whiskey over the wound. Tala did not make a sound, but his entire body went rigid, his hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his own palms. "I am sorry," she whispered. She poured more whiskey over the knife, heating the blade in the fire until it glowed. "Do not be sorry," he hissed. "Be fast." She took the knife. She put her left hand on his good shoulder to steady him, her skin against his. She felt the heat of him, the coiled power, and she began to cut. He threw his head back. A single ragged sound tore from his throat, more animal than man, but he did not move. Clara worked, the world narrowing to the small circle of firelight, the glistening muscle, the probe of the knife. She was sweating. She was crying, but her hands were steady. She found it, the small, deformed piece of lead. She prized it out. "It is done," she breathed. She had nothing to bandage it with. Without thinking, she grabbed the hem of her own petticoat and ripped a long, clean strip of cotton. She began to wrap it around his shoulder, her fingers brushing his chest. He was burning with fever, or with rage. She could not tell. He watched her, his black eyes unreadable. There was fear. Yes, but there was a deep, abiding contempt. Too, he loathed this. He loathed needing her. And she, in that moment, was furious at him. Furious for his refusal of her help, for his stupid pride, for dragging her into this nightmare. "You hate me," she said, pulling the knot tight, maybe tighter than she needed to. He looked at her, his breathing harsh. "I hate this." "You would rather be dead." "I would rather not be touched by you." The words stung. "Then you should have let me go," she said, her voice cold. "You should have let my people find me." "Perhaps I should have," he said. He started to stand, but the blood loss had made him weak. He swayed. She caught him. Her arms were around him, his bare, scarred chest against her dressing gown. For a moment, they were just two people, clinging to each other in a dark cave. He pushed her away, his strength returning with a surge of adrenaline. "Do not—" A sharp crack echoed up the canyon, a rifle shot. Tala was on his feet in an instant, his wound forgotten. He grabbed his rifle, his eyes alert, his body tensed. Clara scrambled to the mouth of the cave, peering into the darkness below. "What is it?" she whispered. "They found the horses," he said. His voice was grim. "The chase has begun." The shot echoed, a flat, hard sound that bounced off the canyon walls and multiplied. It was followed by a human scream, cut short, and the terrified whinny of a horse. "Move," Tala said. The word was not a request. He grabbed her arm, his grip like a steel trap, and pulled her from the mouth of the cave. The trail was narrow, a sliver of broken rock. Below, in the moonlight, she could see them. Soldiers, 4 of them. They had found the horses. 2 of her buckskin's legs were broken. A mercy killing. Her mare. They were shooting Tala's pony as it tried to bolt. "They have killed the horses," she whispered, her voice numb. "They think we are with them." He grunted. He was already moving, climbing, pulling her with him. "They will search the canyon floor. Then they will look up. We must be gone. He was climbing with one arm, his other hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. He moved like a mountain cat, seemingly immune to the pain. Clara scrambled after him, her thin slippers, relics of her cabin, tearing on the sharp rock. Her hands, soft from lotions and soap, were raw and bleeding in minutes. "I cannot, the rocks are sharp," she protested. He did not look back. "Then you will be slow, and they will find you." Anger, hot and clean, cut through her fear. She gritted her teeth, grabbed the rock, and climbed. She followed his dark shape, focusing on the flash of his moccasins, the only thing she could see clearly. They climbed out of the narrow slit of Salt Creek, up onto the high mesa. The land opened up, a vast silver and black world under the moon. They ran. It was not a run. It was a stumbling, painful, breathless trot. He set a pace that was just at the edge of her endurance. He was wounded, but his stamina was inhuman. Clara's lungs felt as if they were full of fire. Her side was a solid knot of pain. But she did not stop. She would not. The image of the soldiers shooting her horse, the casual, brutal efficiency of it, had burned something away inside her. The sun found them on a wide, featureless plain of red sand and scrub. There was nowhere to hide. Behind them, miles back but distinct in the clear air, was a thin column of dust. "They are on horseback," she panted, her throat coated with dust. "They will catch us before noon." "No," he said. He had not spoken for hours. His voice was a rasp. He was paler, his wound seeping through the white cotton of her petticoat, which was now a filthy, dark rag. He pointed to a line of broken hills, miles to the west. "There, we go there. We will never make it." "Then we will die here. Do you want to die here?" She had no answer. She just followed him. The hawks were their only companions. They circled high above, dark specks on the thermal currents, watching their slow, painful progress. Clara felt a strange kinship with the rabbits she sometimes saw, frozen in terror, just before the shadow of the hawk fell on them. Tala stopped. He knelt, his head bowed. She thought he was collapsing. "What is it?" "Water," he whispered. He put his hand to the dry, cracked earth. "Wait." He walked in a slow circle, his head down. Then he stopped, knelt again, and began to dig with his bare hands, his good hand and his wounded one. He dug like a dog, with a desperate, focused energy. Clara watched, thinking he had gone mad. "There is nothing there." He grunted, his breath coming in sobs. He was weak. "Help me." She knelt beside him, scraping at the hard-packed, sun-baked clay. Her fingernails broke. She did not care. She dug until her fingers were raw. The hole was perhaps a foot deep when she felt it. Mud. A thick, gray, foul-smelling mud. Tala shoved her aside. He dug faster, and a small, pitiful puddle of brackish water seeped into the hole. It was the color of coffee and milk. He plunged his face into it and drank. He drank like a dying animal, his throat working. Then he sat back, his chest heaving. "Drink." Clara looked at the muddy hole. She looked at the parasites, small wiggling things. She could see in it. "I cannot." "Drink," he ordered, "or your body will fail." She closed her eyes, lowered her head, and drank. The water was salty, warm, and thick. It tasted of earth and of decay, but it was wet. It coated her throat, and she felt a small, immediate surge of strength. He tore another strip from her ravaged petticoat, dipped it in the water, and bound it around his head. Then he looked at her. She was a ruin. Her fine Boston hair was a matted tangle of twigs and dirt. Her dressing gown was torn to ribbons. Her feet, in their shredded slippers, were bloody. But her eyes were not defeated. They were wide, blue, and blazing with a mixture of terror and fury. "You are strong," he said. It was not a compliment. It was a statement of fact. for a white woman. "Do not," she panted. "Do not talk to me. Just walk." He almost smiled. It was a terrifying expression, a pulling back of his lips from his teeth. He stood up. "Come, the hawks are getting impatient." They reached the hills as the sun was at its zenith. The rocks were too hot to touch. They found a shallow overhang, a slice of shadow, and collapsed. The dust cloud of the soldiers was closer now. They were methodical. They were not fast, but they were not stopping. "They will rest their horses," he said. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. The fever from his wound was on him. "For an hour, maybe 2, we must do the same." Clara watched the dust. She watched him. His face, in the clear, harsh light, was a map of contradictions. It was brutal, with the high, sharp cheekbones and the unbroken line of his nose. But his mouth, in repose, was softer than she had expected. His eyelashes were long, like a child's, resting on his skin. He was beautiful. The thought shocked her. She looked away, her face burning. She was exhausted, terrified, and she was noticing the beauty of the savage who had kidnapped her. She was going mad. "My horse," she said, her voice small. "What?" he whispered, his eyes still closed. "My mare, Jenny, they shot her. Why did they shoot her?" "You ride with a loose rein," he murmured, his words slurring with fever. "You let her have her head. You trust her. That is why you fell behind. You must guide, not ask. You were watching me ride at the fort." "I watch everything." He was delirious, but the observation was sharp and true. She had ridden like an Eastern lady. Out here, you rode like you were part of the horse. "You must ride like you are an arrow," he whispered. "Let the horse be the bow, just one thing." She looked at him, this man who was her enemy, who was wounded and dying, and who was, in his delirium, giving her a riding lesson. "How is your shoulder?" "It is hot." "Let me look." He did not protest. He was too weak. She gently unknot the filthy bandages. The wound was angry. It was red, swollen, and pus was oozing from the edges of her crude stitches. It smelled. "It is infected," she said, her professional tone returning. "I have to clean it." "With what?" She looked around. The desert offered only rock and sun. "With the water." She took the last of their muddy water in her cupped hands. "This will hurt." "Everything," he panted, "hurts." She poured the gritty water into the wound. He stiffened, a low groan escaping his lips, but he did not cry out. She used her fingers, as gently as she could, to clean away the pus. She pressed the edges of the wound, forcing more of the infection out. "It needs a poultice," she murmured to herself. He fumbled in the small pouch at his belt. He pulled out a pinch of dry, greenish-gray powder. "This." "What is it?" "Yarrow and sage. Put it on." She did. She packed the green powder into the wound, and it seemed to an instant cooling effect. The angry red flush seemed to lessen. She tore the last clean strip from her petticoat and bound him tightly. He lay back, his breathing easier. "You are a good medicine woman," he said, "and you are a terrible patient." She replied. The truce, fragile as it was, held for an hour. Then the dust cloud moved. "They are coming," she said. He opened his eyes. The fever had receded, but he was weak. He looked at the soldiers. He looked at her. "This is as far as I go," he said. "What? No. You can make it. The hills—" "I will slow you down. They will catch us both. Go!" "Go where I am. I cannot leave you." "Why not?" His voice was cold again. "I am the savage. You are the white lady. Your people are coming. Go to them. Tell them I took you. Tell them you fought. They will believe you. They will call you a hero." "I will not," she said. "You are a fool." He pushed himself away from her. "Go." "No." He stared at her, his black eyes trying to understand. They will kill me, and they will not be gentle with you. They will see you with me. They will think you are my woman." Clara blushed, a deep, painful red. "I do not care. I will not leave a wounded man." Even an Apache. He studied her face for a long time. Then he nodded. "Then we do not run. We hide." He pointed up. The rocks above them were a jumble of broken granite, a maze. "We climb. They their horses cannot follow. They will not look up. They look for tracks. On the ground." It was a desperate, terrible climb. He was a dead weight. She was pushing him, pulling him, her small frame straining. He was guiding her, his voice a hoarse whisper. "There, that handhold. No to the left." They reached a small, high cave, a pockmark in the cliff face, just as the soldiers entered the base of the hills. They huddled inside, in the dark, watching the blue uniforms, ants in the canyon below. Lieutenant Howard was with them. Clara saw his officer's hat. He was pointing at the ground. At their tracks, they followed them, right to the overhang where they had rested. They are right below us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Be still." Tala breathed. His hand found hers in the dark. His grip was weak, but it was there. He was telling her to be silent. They heard the voices. They were faint, carried on the wind. "Our tracks go in, sir, but they do not come out." "Must have climbed. Search the rocks." "No," Howard's voice. "He is Apache. He would not climb. He would run. He is leading us into a trap. We go around. We will catch them on the flats." The soldiers milled, confused. Then they mounted up. They rode out of the hills, heading west, picking up the flat ground. Clara let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She began to laugh, a wild, high-pitched, hysterical sound. Tala's hand, the good one, clamped over her mouth. "Quiet! They leave a rear guard!" She stopped, her body shaking. He was right. 2 soldiers had remained, hidden in the rocks at the mouth of the canyon. "They will wait until dark," he whispered. "We wait here." The rest of the day was a new kind of hell. The sun beat on the cliff face, turning the small cave into an oven. They had no water. They sat in the suffocating heat, in silence, their bodies pressed together. Clara was aware of him, of the heat of his fevered skin, the smell of his wound, of the man. He was no longer a savage. He was a person. He was Tala. The sun finally set. The desert night, with its sudden, shocking cold, fell like a blanket. The wind picked up, and it was a cold, salty wind. It moaned through the rocks, and it carried the stars, which were so close, so bright, they looked like holes punched in a black ceiling. "They are gone," he said. His voice was thick. "I think I am cold," she said. Her teeth were chattering. He was shaking, too. The fever and the cold were a terrible combination. "Here." He pulled her against him. His body was hot, too hot. He was burning up, but he was solid. He wrapped his good arm around her, pulling her back against his chest. "I should not," she whispered. "We will die of cold," he said. "Do not be a fool." She relaxed into him. It was a strange, forbidden comfort. She was lying in the arms of a wanted murderer, an enemy of her people, and she had never felt safer. They sat like that for a long time. The wind howled, and in the dark, he began to speak. "The brand," he said, his voice a low rumble against her back. "You saw it?" "Yes." "Fort Verde, 2 years. I was a scout. For your soldiers." "A scout?" "Yes, I thought we could live together. I showed them the passes. I hunted for them." He was quiet for a long time. Then the new colonel came. He said all Apache are dogs. He had us arrested, all the scouts. He said we were spies. He branded us, like cattle. Clara closed her eyes. The image of it, the hot iron, the smell of burning flesh, making her sick. "I escaped," he said. "I ran back to my people, to the reservation at Camp Grant. I told them the white man cannot be trusted. They did not believe me. They wanted peace." He stopped. His body was shaking, but not from the cold. It was a deep, racking tremor. "The next month I was hunting in the hills. I saw the smoke. I ran back." His voice broke. It was not a sob. It was a dry, terrible sound, like rock breaking. "They were all dead. The soldiers, the men from Tucson. They came at dawn. My people were sleeping. They killed everyone. The women, the children. They used clubs." He was back there. She could feel it. He was not in the cave with her. He was in the smoke and the blood. "I found my mother, my father. They were in the river. I looked for my sister." "Your sister," Clara whispered. "Little bird. She was 14 years old. She was not there. She was not dead. They took her. They sold her. A slave. In Mexico. I have been looking for her ever since." Clara felt the tears on her own face. But they were not for herself. They were for him. For this impossible weight of grief. "Tala," she whispered. "I am so sorry." "Sorry," he spat. The word was full of venom. "Your people are always sorry. It is a useless word." Clara's heart was pounding. A cold, terrible dread was creeping up her spine. "Tala, when was this?" 203 moons ago. "At Camp Grant?" "Yes," he stiffened. "How did you know?" She pulled away from him. She had to. She sat facing him in the dark. "Tala," she said, her voice shaking so hard she could barely speak. That unit, the soldiers from Fort Bowie, they were there. They were part of it." "I know." "No," she said. "You do not understand. I was the nurse for that unit. I came with them. I was there. After, I tended to them. I cleaned their wounds. The wounds they got from killing your people." The silence in the cave was absolute. It was colder than the wind. It was heavier than the rock. Tala stood up. He was not weak. He was not feverish. He was a pillar of pure, unadulterated rage. He was the angel of death. "You," he whispered. "I did not know." She sobbed. "I swear to God, I did not know what they had done. They said it was a battle. They said the Apache had attacked them." "You breathed the same air," he said. His voice was a dead, flat thing. You touched them. You healed them. You are one of them." He stepped out of the cave, onto the ledge. He stood in the moonlight, his body a taut bowstring of hatred. "Tala, please," she begged, crawling after him. "Get back," he snarled. "Please, I should kill you," he said. He was looking at her, but his eyes were black, empty pits. "I should throw you from this cliff. It would be a kindness." "Then do it," she cried. "Do it. But do not look at me like that." He turned away from her. He looked out at the desert. "I will not kill you. I will not touch you. You are poison. I am leaving. Stay here. Your people will find you, or the wolves will." He began to climb down the cliff face. "No, Tala, do not leave me," she screamed. "Do not." He did not look back. He disappeared into the darkness. Clara collapsed on the ledge, her sobs echoing in the empty canyon. She was alone, truly alone. She did not know how long she wept. It might have been minutes, or an hour. The cold seeped into her bones. She was going to die here. And then she heard it. A high, thin sound, a yip, and then another. It was answered, closer this time. A pack, coyotes, or wolves. They were below her. In the canyon, they had smelled her. Or him. A new terror, a primal terror, gripped her. She scrambled back into the cave, pressing herself against the rock. The howling was closer now. She was going to be eaten alive. A rock clattered. She looked a shape. It was Tala. He was climbing back up. He hauled himself onto the ledge, his face a mask of stone. He did not look at her. He walked past her, into the back of the cave, and sat down. "Why?" she whispered. He did not answer for a long time. The howling outside grew more frantic. "The Apache," he said, his voice quiet. "Do not leave even a dog to the wolves." He had come back. He had come back for her. She looked at him, this savage, this man who hated her, who had every right to hate her, and she saw, for the first time, not the warrior, not the victim. She saw the man who had chosen to return. The first fragile thread it had been spun. She sat in the other corner of the cave. She was cold. He was cold, but they were alive. They waited for the dawn. When it came, it was gray and unforgiving. They were both exhausted. They had to move. Tala, he was stiff. His wound was worse, but he stood. "We must go high," he said. "See where they are." They climbed to the top of the mesa. It took them an hour. The world was spread out below them. And they saw them. Not far, perhaps 5 miles away, in a shallow basin. Fires, dozens of them. It was not the small patrol. It was the whole damned army. "They are not hunting us," Clara said. "They are looking for all of your people. It is a war party." Tala stood beside her. He watched the smoke. "Yes." She looked at him. His face was grim. "Tala, where do we go?" He looked at the campfires. He looked back the way they had come, toward the distant memory of Fort Bowie. "There is no back," he said, "and we cannot go forward." They were trapped. 2 enemies, 2 survivors, 2 people with no place left to go. The desert had them. They did not stay on the high mesa. To stay was to be seen, and to be seen was to die. The army camp below was a city of canvas and smoke, and Tala watched it with a cold, calculating eye. He was weak. His wound was a hot, pulsing fire on his shoulder. But his mind was clear. "We go," he said, his voice a dry rasp. Clara had expected him to turn east, back toward the brutal, empty wilderness. Instead, he turned north, walking along the high rim of the canyon. He was looking for something. He found it as the afternoon light began to fail. It was not a trail. It was a flaw in the rock, a narrow chimney that disappeared into shadow. "Here," he said. "That is a grave," Clara said, her voice hollow. "We cannot climb down there." "We can," he said. "Or we can wait for the soldiers." He went first. He slid into the darkness, his body braced against the 2 walls. His feet finding hold she could not see. She followed. She had to. The descent was a new kind of terror. It was dark, and the rock tore at her ruined clothes, her raw hands. Twice, she slipped. Twice, his good hand, reaching up from the darkness below, grabbed her wrist, his grip so strong it felt like it would snap her bones. He did not speak. He just held her, steadying her, until her foot found purchase. They reached the bottom in full darkness. They were in a narrow, dry riverbed, a wadi floored with sand that muffled their steps. They walked all night. He set a punishing pace. He seemed to draw strength from the darkness, while she, a creature of light and order, stumbled and fell. He would wait, a dark shape in the gloom, until she picked herself up, and then he would move on. There was no pity in him. There was only the brutal, forward momentum of survival. For 2 days, they moved like ghosts. They traveled at night and hid during the day, sleeping in shallow scrapes under thorny acacia trees. They had no food, and the only water was the brackish, muddy water he had found, which they carried in her single, torn slipper. He had forced her to abandon the other. On the 3rd day, Clara collapsed. Her body, pushed beyond every limit she had ever known, simply stopped. "I cannot," she whispered, her face pressed to the hot sand. "I am finished. Leave me." He stood over her. She watched his moccasins, waiting for them to walk away. She waited for the silence. He did not walk away. He knelt. He touched her face, his fingers rough, his hand, for all its strength, surprisingly gentle. He was checking for fever. "Not yet," he said. He left her. She lay there, drifting, not caring if she woke. She woke to the smell of smoke. He had built a fire, a small, almost invisible fire, in a deep hole, shielded by rocks. He was holding something over it. A lizard. It was skinned and spitted on a sharp stick. "Eat," he said. She had seen ladies faint at the sight of a mouse in Boston. She took the lizard. She ate the charred, tough meat, and it was the best thing she had ever tasted. The meat gave her the strength to walk another mile, and at the end of that mile, he stopped. "Water," he said. She could smell nothing but dust, but he turned, walking up a small, rocky draw, and there, at the base of a high cliff, was a thin green line of willow trees, a spring. It was barely a trickle, but it was clean, and it was cold. Clara wept. She put her face in the water and drank until she was sick. Then she drank again. "Not so fast," Tala said. He was already cleaning his wound. The yarrow poultice had drawn out the worst of the infection, but it was still a raw, ugly thing. "We can stay here," she asked. "For a time." He said, "We are hidden. The army is west. This place is east." They made a camp. It was a miserable thing. A hollow under a rock overhang, shielded by a pile of dead brush he had arranged. But it was a home. It was the first time in days she had not been moving. The rules of survival changed. Here, it was not about endurance. It was about patience. He was weak. His body needed to heal. She, in turn, was weak with hunger. "I will teach you to hunt," he said. "I cannot kill," she started. "Then you will starve," he said flatly. He showed her how to make a snare, a simple loop of fiber hidden in a rabbit run. It was tedious. She had to sit for hours, unmoving, just to find the path. He showed her how to read the faint scratches in the dirt. The first time she checked the snare, it was empty. The second time, it held a small rabbit. It was alive. It was twisting, its eyes wide with terror. "I cannot," she whispered, her stomach turning. "Give it to me." He took the rabbit. He killed it with a single sharp twist of his hands. His face was blank. He felt nothing. "You must learn this," he said. "I am still wounded. I cannot hunt for both of us." He taught her how to skin it. Her hands, the hands of a nurse, were slick with blood, but she did it. He did not want to risk a fire. "Not yet. The smoke," he said. "It travels." He found flat, black stones. He made a hole, a shallow grave in the sand. He made a tiny, smokeless fire of dry mesquite roots at the bottom, heating the stones until they shimmered. He wrapped the pieces of rabbit in wet leaves he had gathered from the spring. He placed the meat between the hot stones, and then he buried the entire thing. "We wait," he said. Hours later, he dug it up. The smell was wonderful. The meat was pale and tender and steamed. It fell off the bone. They ate in silence. The silence between them was heavy. It was filled with the ghosts of Camp Grant. He hated her. She knew he did. He hated her for being white, for being one of them. And yet he had come back for her. He was teaching her. He was feeding her. One evening, as the sky turned purple, she was cleaning the bandages in the spring. He was sitting on a rock watching her. "Why did you come here?" he asked. His voice was quiet. "I am a nurse," she said. "Boston is far." He said, "Why leave your home?" She stopped washing. She looked at her hands in the water. I studied medicine." She said, I wanted to heal people. I believed in it. Then the war came. Your white man's war, he said. Yes, I worked in a hospital in Washington. I saw what men do to each other, for a flag, for an idea, and I hated it. I could not be a part of it anymore. I thought if I came west I could do good, away from the politics, away from the war. He made that sound, the dry, harsh laugh. You run from your people. The word stung. She turned. Yes, she said, her voice sharp. I ran because they are wrong, because they kill for reasons I do not understand. She took a breath. And you were cast out by mine. She pointed to his branded shoulder. And your own people did not believe you when you warned them. You are as alone as I am. We are not so different. The silence that followed was new. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was a kind of shocked recognition. He was an exile. She was an exile. Two lost souls, hiding by a spring. He looked away first. He stood. The night gets cold. He said, we need more wood. The routine of their life was simple. They ate, they slept, they watched. His wound began to heal. The flesh knit together. Her hands toughened. Her skin turned brown. She learned to move quietly. She learned to listen to the wind. But the desert was not done with them. The brackish water, the strange food, the exposure, it had a cost. She woke one night shivering. The fire was low, but she was freezing. A deep, bone-chilling cold. Tala, she whispered. He was awake in an instant. He touched her forehead. His hand was cool. She was burning. Fever, he said. By morning, she was delirious. She was back in Boston. She was talking to her mother. She was in the hospital in Washington. Tala watched her. This was not a bullet. This was not a knife. This was a poison in the blood. He did not know how to fight it. He did what he could. He brewed a bitter tea from willow bark. He forced it down her throat. He bathed her face with cool water. But the fever grew. That night, she began to shake. A violent, racking shudder. Her teeth were chattering so hard he thought she would break them. So cold, she moaned. I am so cold. He built up the fire. He piled the last of their wood on it. He wrapped her in his own dry blanket, but she was still shaking. He knew what he had to do. He had seen it done for children. He sat behind her. He pulled her back against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her. No, she murmured, half conscious. No, do not touch. Be still, woman, he growled. You will die of the cold. He held her. He was stiff. This was wrong. This was a violation. He was touching her. This white woman. This woman who was one of them. The poison. But she was so small, so frail, and she was dying. He held her tighter. He poured his own body heat into her. The fire cast dancing shadows on the cave wall. She stopped shaking. She relaxed against him. She sighed. She turned in his arms, her face pressing into his shoulder. He froze. His body was a rigid wall of stone. She was mumbling, delirious. She looked up. Her eyes were open, but she was not seeing him. The firelight was on his face. So warm, she whispered. She lifted her hand. It was shaking, but not from cold, from fever. She touched his face. Her fingers, chapped and raw, traced the line of his jaw. He stopped breathing. Her fingers moved. Her thumb brushed his lips. It was a touch as light as a moth's wing. Tala shuddered, a violent, full-body tremor. He recoiled as if he had been struck. He pushed her away so fast she almost fell into the fire. He scrambled to the other side of the overhang. He was on his feet. He was breathing like a winded horse. Clara was blinking, the fever receding for a moment, replaced by confusion. What is it? He was staring at her. His eyes were black pits of terror. Not of her, of himself. Woman, he said. His voice was a low, strangled rasp. You will make me sin before God himself." He turned and punched the rock wall. His fist hit the granite with a sick thud. He did not cry out. He was trembling. He, the man who had faced soldiers and prisons and wolves, was undone by the touch of a sick woman's thumb. He was a wild animal, cornered by a softness he had never known. He was terrified. Clara watched him. She did not understand. She only knew that the man who had saved her was now afraid of her. She pulled the blanket tighter and turned away. The silence in the cave was no longer empty. It was alive. It was full of a new, terrible, burning fire. The fever broke 2 days later. She woke, weak and clear-headed, to find a piece of cooked rabbit and a skin of fresh water by her side. Tala was gone. She panicked. He had left her. She stumbled out of the cave. He was there, at the spring. He was standing perfectly still, looking down at the mud at the water's edge. Tala. He did not turn. He just pointed. She came up beside him. In the soft mud, clear as a brand, was a single, perfect footprint. It was not a moccasin. It was a boot, a cavalry boot. "Soldiers," he said, his voice dead. "They have found the stream." The boot print was a violation, a scream in the silent morning. It was not just a footprint. It was a sentence. They were found. Tala did not hesitate. The time for caution was gone. He grabbed her arm. "Run!" He did not go back to the camp. He ran, half dragging her, straight toward what looked like a solid wall of sheer red rock. He was weak. His healed shoulder was stiff, and he was favoring it. But a desperate animal energy now powered him. "Where?" she panted, scrambling after him. "It is a wall." "It is a door," he hissed. He found it, a crack, no wider than his own shoulders, hidden by a curtain of long dead ivy. "In," he commanded. "Now." She squeezed into the darkness. The rock was cold and claustrophobic. He pushed in behind her. "Climb! Do not look down! Do not stop!" It was not a path. It was a scar. A high, narrow ledge that wound its way up the inside of the cliff face. Exposed to the sky on one side, below them, the drop was 1,000 feet. The wind howled, trying to pluck them from the rock. Clara fixed her eyes on the back of his head. This was the place the old maps called the Devil's Backbone. It was a place where horses could not go, and where, it was said, men lost their souls. A shout echoed from far below. "There they are, on the ridge fire!" The first shot was a flat crack, the bullet whining past her head. So close she felt its hot breath. It struck the rock in front of her, exploding into a puff of red dust and lead fragments. Clara screamed and flattened herself against the stone. "Move!" Tala roared. He grabbed her, pulling her. To move is to live. He was a target. His larger frame, his slower, wounded gait. He was shielding her with his own body as they shuffled along the ledge. The soldiers were below, ants with rifles, firing up at them. It was a desperate, impossible range, but there were many of them. Another bullet sang past, and then another. Tala grunted. It was not a loud sound. It was a short, sharp exhalation of air. He stopped. "Tala," she asked, her voice trembling. He leaned against the rock wall. His eyes were closed for a brief second. When he opened them, they were full of a terrible, familiar pain. "They have hit me," he said. "The shoulder," she whispered, her heart sinking. "Your old wound." He shook his head. He looked down at his left shoulder. His good one. A dark, blossoming stain was spreading across the buckskin. "They are balanced," he said, a grim, feverish humor in his voice. "One for each shoulder." He was badly hurt. Both arms were now compromised. He was losing blood. "We have to stop," she said. "I have to." "We stop. We die," he said. He pushed himself off the wall. "Help me." He was no longer pulling her. She was now pulling him. She got her shoulder under his good arm. Taking his weight, he was a mountain of a man, and the heat from his fever and his new wound was already scorching. They moved, a single, wounded, two-headed creature, shuffling along the ledge. The pass ended. It did not open up into safety, but into a trap, a small, circular basin, a natural amphitheater of rock, with high walls on all sides. The devil's backbone was the only way in, and the only way out. "We are trapped," Clara breathed, lowering him to the ground. The soldiers would be at the mouth of the pass in minutes. Tala was already fumbling with his rifle, trying to load it with one hand, his other arm useless. His face was pale, sheened with a cold sweat. And then, a new sound, a different rifle, heavier, a Sharps. Maybe it came from above, from the rim of the basin. A voice, not a soldier's, cut through the air. It was a big voice, full of whiskey and false cheer. "Well, now, Tala Redhawk, you have gone and got yourself in a hornet's nest. And you brought a lady?" Clara looked up. On the rim, silhouetted against the bright blue sky, were 6 men, not soldiers. These were hard men, bounty hunters. Their leader was a man with a flowing, yellow mustache and a fine, pearl-handled revolver on each hip. Tala had frozen. His face was not angry. It was cold. It was full of a deeper, older hatred. Ben Carraway. He said. The name was a curse. "In the flesh, my friend," Carraway laughed. He was a handsome man, in a ruined, dangerous way. "I have been tracking you for 2 weeks, ever since you slipped that rope at Bowie. And here you are, delivered to me by the United States Army. It is almost poetic." The first of the soldiers appeared at the mouth of the pass. They stopped, seeing the new arrivals on the rim. Carraway saw them. He held up a hand. "Hold your fire. Blue boys, we all want the same thing." He looked down at Tala. "Is not that right?" Lieutenant Howard stepped out. Clara saw his face. It was grim. "Who are you?" Howard shouted. "Ben Carraway. At your service, I got a writ for that Apache right there. Dead or alive. And you." He pointed at Clara. "You got a prize of your own. The squaw doctor. The little traitor nurse." He grinned at Tala. "So, here's the bargain, my old friend. The Army wants the woman. I want you. It seems to me we have a simple trade." He turned his charm on Howard. "Lieutenant, I will make this easy. You are pinned down. We are up high. My men are eager. You let us have the Apache, and we will hand you the woman. Clean. No more blood." Tala said nothing. He was just waiting. Howard hesitated. He looked at Clara. His face was a mask of conflict. "No," Clara shouted. "Lieutenant, do not listen to him. He is a murderer." Carraway laughed. "She has spirit, I like that." He looked back at Tala. "What will it be? Friend, you give her up, or we all die here in this rock oven. Give me the woman. I will let you keep your rifle. You can die fighting them. It is a good death." Tala finally moved. He used the rock to push himself to his feet. He was swaying. He looked at Carraway. He looked at Howard. He looked at Clara. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but it filled the basin. "No." Carraway's smile vanished. "You always were a fool." "He will not trade me," Clara said, her voice shaking. "And I will not leave him." Tala looked at her, a flicker of something. Surprise. "Well," Carraway sighed, "it seems we do it the hard way." He raised his hand. The world exploded. Carraway's men opened fire. The soldiers returned it. The basin became a cauldron of noise, smoke, and ricocheting lead. "Behind the rock," Tala gasped, pulling Clara down. They were in the crossfire. Bullets were coming from 2 directions. "This is bad," Tala said. He was trying to aim his rifle one-handed, but he was shaking from blood loss. Clara was terrified. She was not a fighter. She was a healer. Her hands were shaking. She was useless. Then she saw it. One of Carraway's men, A thin, weasel-faced man was not on the rim. He had taken another path. He was on a low ledge, not 20 feet away. He was not firing at the soldiers. He was taking careful aim. At Tala. Tala was watching the soldiers, trying to find Howard. He did not see the man. "Tala!" Clara screamed. "Behind you!" He tried to turn, but he was too slow, too weak. The man smiled, his finger tightening on the trigger. There was no time. There was no thought. There was only instinct. Clara grabbed the pistol from Tala's belt, the one he had taken from the dead bounty hunter days ago. She had never fired a gun in her life. She did not know how. She lifted the heavy, cold metal. She pointed it at the weasel-faced man. She closed her eyes, and she pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening. It was a physical blow. The pistol kicked up, slamming into her own face, splitting her lip. The noise and the power of it threw her backward. She opened her eyes. She was shaking. The basin was, for a single second, quiet. Everyone had stopped to see. The weasel-faced man was still on the ledge. He was looking at her. His face was full of surprise. He was still standing. She had missed. No, he was not standing. He was just propped there. He had a new third eye in the middle of his forehead. He toppled forward, slow as a falling tree, and crashed onto the rocks below. She had not missed. Clara looked at the pistol in her hand. It was smoking. She looked at the dead man. She looked at Tala. He was staring at her. His black eyes were wide. The hate was gone. The pain was gone. It was replaced by a raw, profound awe. She had killed a man. The shock was a physical wave. Her stomach turned. She was going to be sick. "Clara," Tala whispered. "That," Ben Carraway's voice boomed, "was some fine shooting, little lady, but this is not my day." The tide had turned. Carraway was a businessman. The fight was not worth the cost. "We are out," he yelled. He and his men vanished from the rim. They had just gone. But the soldiers were still there. And now they were angry. They were coming. "We must go," Tala said. He was fading. "Go where?" she said, her voice numb. "There." He nodded with his head toward a dark crack, a pile of rocks at the far end of the basin. "My ancestors." She put her arm around him. She pulled him. He was a dead weight. She was fueled by a new, terrible energy, the energy of the killer. She was no longer just a nurse. They reached the rocks. It was a small opening, hidden by a rockfall. They crawled inside, into the darkness. They heard the soldiers enter the basin. They heard them shouting. They heard Howard call her name, "Clara, Clara. It is me. You are safe." She put her hand over Tala's mouth. He did not fight. He was unconscious, or close to it. They hid in the darkness, breathing in the cold. Ancient dust. They listened as the soldiers searched. For an hour. 2. "She is not here, sir," a voice said. "The Apache must have taken her. Or Carraway." "He did not take her," Howard said. His voice was heavy. "She is with him. She killed that man. I saw it. She killed him." Clara closed her eyes. She was no longer Clara Monroe. She was a killer, a traitor. "We move on," Howard said. "They cannot have gone far." They heard them leave, the sound of boots on rock, and then silence. They waited, for hours, until the sun was gone, and the moon filled the small basin with silver light. He was breathing, barely. "Tala," she whispered. He opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the pistol, still in her hand. "You saved me," he whispered. "I killed a man," she said, her voice dead. The pistol fell from her numb fingers. "You did what you had to do," he said. She had to see to his wound. She fumbled for her bandages, her ruined petticoat, in the faint moonlight that filtered into the cave. She saw them. On the walls, paintings. They were old, so old, painted in red and yellow earth. They were pictures of animals and people, and two symbols over and over. One was a dancing, leaping shape, red. The other was a blue spiral. "What is this place?" she whispered, her fingers tracing the wall. Tala looked at the paintings. A small, faint smile touched his lips. The old place, the place of the story. "What story?" "Fire," he said, pointing to the red shape. "Fire and wind." He pointed to the spiral. "Wind." "Fire and wind," she repeated. "The shaman says fire is the man. He burns hot, he is strong. But if he has no wind, he dies. He becomes ash." He took a painful breath. "And the wind, she is the woman. She is free. She is spirit. But if she has no fire, she is just cold. She has no center. She just blows away." He looked at her. His eyes were clear. Fire needs wind to burn. Wind needs fire to be warm. They must meet, or the world is cold and dark. Clara looked at the paintings. She looked at this broken, bleeding man who was fire. And she looked at her own hands, stained with blood and powder. She, the nurse, the wind. She said nothing. She just began to clean his wound. Her fear was gone. It had been burned away. In its place was something hard, something new. Determination. The cave of the fire and the wind was a tomb, and then it was a womb. For 3 days, Tala Redhawk hovered in the gray space between worlds. His body was a furnace of fever. The new bullet, the one in his left shoulder, had shattered the bone. Clara worked with a cold, terrifying clarity. She was no longer a nurse from Boston. She was a creature of the high desert. She had nothing. She had her knife, which she cleaned in the spring. She had the last of the yarrow powder. She had the remaining filthy strips of her petticoat. She set the bone herself, her full weight against his, forcing the splintered ends to align while he screamed, unconscious. She bound him so tightly he could not move. She fed him water, drop by drop, and when she was not tending him, she was a predator. She was the one who now checked the snares, killing the rabbits with a stone, her face blank. She was the one who stole down to the spring in the dark, her ears straining for the sound of a boot. She was the wind, and he was the fire, and she was desperately fanning an ember. At Fort Bowie, the story had taken root. Lieutenant Howard had returned, his face a mask of stone. He had reported the confrontation. He had reported that the renegade nurse was no longer a prisoner. She was a combatant. She had killed a man to protect the Apache. The word spread through the barracks like a pox. Squaw doctor was no longer a whisper. It was a known fact. She was a traitor, a renegade. The colonel, furious at the loss of his men and the escape of his prisoner, authorized a full patrol. Howard, his face tight with a pain that was more than just duty, demanded to lead it. He was not just hunting an enemy. He was hunting a memory. He was hunting the woman he had, in his own stiff way, loved. Tala woke on the 4th day. His eyes were clear. The fever had broken. He looked at Clara. She was gaunt, her face covered in grime and dried blood from her cut lip, her hair a wild nest. She was asleep, slumped against the cave wall, holding the heavy pistol. He looked at her, at the gun, at the clean bandage on his shoulder. He understood. The dynamic was broken. He was the one who had been saved. "Clara," he said. His voice was a dry croak. She woke instantly. The pistol coming up before her eyes were even open. She saw him, and the weapon lowered. "You are awake." "You stayed." "I am a nurse," she said. It was an old, hollow excuse, and they both knew it. "No," he said, looking at the gun. "You are not." He began the slow, painful process of sitting up. He was a ruin. Both arms were bound to his chest. He was, for all his strength, as helpless as a child. "We must go," he said. "You cannot move. You have 2 broken shoulders. You have lost too much blood." "The army will come," he said, the words forced through his gritted teeth. They are slow, but they are like the heat. They come. We go south, to Mexico. The line they will not cross. We are on foot, she said. You cannot walk a mile. I can walk 10, he said. Help me stand. She did. It was a terrible, agonizing process. He was a dead weight. She was his crutch. He leaned on her, his full weight pressing her small, weary frame. They left the cave of the fire and wind. They left their sanctuary. They moved south, at night, a single, limping shadow. They made 2 miles the first night, 3 the second. He was in constant, silent agony. He would not speak. He would not stop. He would only walk. On the 5th night, the sky turned against them. The wind, which had been their companion, became their enemy. It rose. It was a high, thin whine, and it brought the desert with it. A wall of yellow dust, a mile high, swept across the land. A sandstorm! Clara screamed over the roar. Good! Tala grunted. He pulled her behind a wall of rock. It covers the tracks. They huddled for a full day as the world was scoured. The air was so thick with sand they could not breathe. They covered their faces with the last of their rags, the sand finding its way into their mouths. Their eyes, it was a new choking hell. When the storm passed, the land was changed. It was clean, it was empty, and it was unmarked. But the storm had cost them. They were out of water, and they were exposed. They were crossing a high, broken plain when they saw the dust. It was not the storm. It was a patrol. Howard, he had read the land, had anticipated their direction. They are here, Tala said. He did not sound surprised. Run, Clara said. I cannot run. Then hide. There was nowhere, just broken rock. They scrambled into a dry arroyo. It was a trap. There, the shout, a soldier, not far. Gunfire. The bullets were close. Run, Clara, Tala said. I will hold them. No. Go, he roared. She did not. She grabbed his arm. This way. They were running, scrambling, not as 2 people, as one. Clara was not a desert creature. She was still from Boston. She was tired. She stumbled. Her foot caught on a loose piece of shale. She cried out, a sharp yelp of pain. Her ankle, it was not a sprain. She felt the bone grate. I cannot walk, she whispered, the realization a cold stone. My leg, it is broken. Tala looked at her. He looked at the soldiers, now dismounting at the head of the arroyo. He looked at the open plain beyond them. It was a salt flat, miles of white, cracked earth, a place of no cover, a killing field. Tala, she begged, leave me. You can make it. Go. He looked at her. His face was a mask of agony. The fire, he whispered, does not leave the wind. He did the impossible. He was a man with 2 shattered shoulders. He was a man who had not eaten in days. He bent. He put his arms around her. He lifted her. She screamed, not from her leg, from his pain. His wounds tore open. Blood ran down his chest, but he held her. He carried her. He began to walk out onto the salt flat. Howard and his men reached the edge. They watched. Sir, a soldier said, we have them. Howard raised his hand. He was watching the man carry the woman. He was watching the impossibility of it. Do not shoot, Howard said, his voice hoarse. Do not ride on that salt. You will lose the horses. He was lying. He was transfixed. He was watching something he did not understand. Tala walked. Each step was a lifetime. The salt crunched under his moccasins. The sun beat down. The white of the ground reflected it, blinding them. Clara had her arms around his neck. She was crying. Put me down, she wept. You are killing yourself. Be quiet, woman, he panted. His blood was dripping onto the white salt. You are not heavy. You are just loud. He walked for an hour. 2. The soldiers were small specks behind them. They had given up. He reached the far side. He walked 10 more paces onto the red earth, and then his legs buckled. He did not fall. He crumpled. He set her down gently, and then he collapsed beside her. He was unconscious. He was bleeding out. "Tala!" she screamed. She was alone. Her leg was useless. He was dying. She saw it. Half a mile away. A ruin. The crumbling adobe walls of an old building. A church. A Spanish mission. "Help me," she prayed, to a God she was no longer sure she believed in. She began to crawl. She grabbed his shirt in her fist. She dragged him. It was not a long distance. It was an eternity. She pulled. She sobbed. She pulled. Her hands were raw. Her broken leg was a fire of pure agony. She got him inside the ruined walls. The roof was gone. A large wooden cross was tilted against a wall. Half fallen. She ripped open his shirt. The wounds were horrific. They were torn open. "Do not die," she commanded. "Do not you dare die." She had nothing. She used her own hair to tie off a bleeder. She used her own saliva to clean the grit from the wound. She tore at the sleeve of her own dress to make a new bandage. She worked all afternoon. He was still, too still. Night fell. The desert night, cold and clear. The stars were brilliant through the missing roof. She was sitting beside him. Her leg was propped on a pile of rubble. She was exhausted. She was lost. A single boot scraped on stone. Clara grabbed the pistol. She aimed it at the doorway. A figure stood there. A blue uniform. "Clara." It was Lieutenant Howard. He was alone. "Do not come closer. Lieutenant," she said. Her voice was as cold and dead as the salt flat. He stepped inside. He looked at the scene. He saw her. A wild, ragged creature. He saw the dying Apache. His face was a mask of pain. "Clara," he whispered. "My God, what has he done to you?" "What has he done?" she laughed. It was a terrible sound. "He has done nothing. He carried me. He saved me." "He is a savage," Howard said, his voice pleading. "He is a murderer. He has poisoned your mind. Look at yourself. Look at what you have become." "I have become a survivor," she said, "something you would not understand." "It is not too late," he said, taking a step. "Come back with me. Now, I will protect you. I will tell them he forced you, that you were his prisoner. We can fix this." "He did not force me," Clara said. She looked at Tala's still face. "I am here because I choose to be." "You choose this," Howard's voice was breaking. "This filth, this animal." "I choose him," she said. "Now leave." "No." His face changed. The pleading was gone. It was replaced by the cold righteousness of his uniform. "I will not leave you. I will not let him have you." "He does not have me," she snarled. "I am not a possession. I am a woman, and I am telling you to go." "I will not. I am taking you back, and I am ending this. He is a known hostile. I am authorized to use deadly force." "You will not touch him," she said, raising the pistol. Howard looked at the gun. He laughed. "You will not shoot me? Clara, you are a nurse." "I am not," she said. "I am the woman who killed Ben Carraway's man. Do not test me." He saw it in her eyes. She meant it. His love snapped. The rejection was total. The woman he loved was gone. In her place was this monster, and the man responsible was lying at her feet. "If I cannot save your soul," he whispered, his own pistol appearing in his hand, "I will save it from him." He was not aiming at her. He was aiming at Tala. "No!" Clara screamed. She lunged. She threw herself forward, her broken leg collapsing under her. She was too slow. Howard fired. The shot was a cannon blast in the small church. It echoed off the crumbling walls. Tala's body arched off the ground. A terrible, final spasm. He was hit, center mass, in the chest. He fell back, A new bloom of dark blood soaked the front of his shirt. He was still. Howard stood over him, the pistol smoking. "It is done," he breathed. "He is gone." Clara was frozen. She looked at the blood. She looked at Howard's righteous, terrible face. She crawled to Tala. She laid her head on his chest. She heard nothing. No breath, no heartbeat. The blood was soaking into the dirt floor of the church, staining the ground beneath the tilted cross. She turned her head. She looked up at the tall, handsome lieutenant. Her voice was not a scream. It was a whisper, but it cut him deeper than any knife. "You just killed," she said, her voice trembling with a cold, clear rage. "The only man here who knew what a free soul was." Howard did not flinch. He did not move. Her words, so cold and full of a truth he could not understand, had frozen him in place. He was a man of regulations, of duty. He had just performed an execution on a hostile target, but the woman he loved had just called him a murderer. He stared at her, his mind a fractured, uncomprehending void. He was still holding the smoking pistol. The silence of the ruin was absolute. There was only the sound of Clara's ragged breathing and the metallic tang of gunpowder in the air. That silence was shattered. It was not a gunshot. It was a sound that did not belong to the white man's world. A high ululating cry that ripped through the night, multiplied by the rocks. It was a sound from the throat of the desert itself. Before Howard could even turn, they were there. Not one, but 6. They were shadows, moving with a speed that was not human. Apache warriors. They had not been attacking the fort. They had been trailing the patrol, trailing their lost warrior. They had seen Howard go in alone. They had heard the shot. They boiled into the ruined church. Howard was a soldier, but he was one man. He had time to fire his pistol once, a wild, useless shot that went into the adobe wall. Then he was buried. They were on him, a tide of painted, furious bodies. They did not try to kill him. They disarmed him, bound him, and dragged him from the church with a brutal, efficient silence. It was over in 30 seconds. Clara had not moved. She was still hunched over Tala's body, her hands pressed to the new, terrible wound in his chest. She was trying to force the life back into him. "Do not," she whispered, her voice a desperate prayer. "You cannot. Do not leave me." A tall warrior, his face painted in the stark white and black of grief, entered the ruin. He looked at Clara, his eyes full of contempt for the white woman. Then he looked at the man on the ground. He knelt. He saw Tala. He saw the blood. He saw the still pale face. He let out a low moan of grief. He looked at Clara, and his eyes said she was responsible. He turned and stalked out of the church. He barked a command. 2 warriors dragged Howard forward, throwing him to his knees in the moonlight, just outside the church door. The tall warrior raised a long, steel-tipped lance. He was going to kill the soldier. He was going to answer blood with blood. A sound. It was not a word. It was a cough, a wet, agonizing sound of lungs fighting for air. The tall warrior froze. Clara scrambled to Tala's face. His eyes were open, not all the way, just a slit. He was looking at her. He was alive. The bullet, it had struck him, but it must have glanced off a rib. It had missed his heart. It was a miracle of anatomy, a terrible, bloody miracle. "He is alive!" Clara screamed, the word tearing from her raw throat. She looked at the tall warrior. "Alive! Help me, I need water, I need light." The warrior was stunned. He came back into the church, staring. Tala's eyes found him. "My uncle," Tala rasped. The word was barely a bubble of blood and air. The warrior barked a new set of orders. One man ran for water. Another began to build a fire, his drill moving with frantic speed. Tala was alive, but he was leaving. She could see it. He was drowning in his own blood. "Turn him," Clara commanded, her voice the sharp, clear instrument of the nurse. "Turn him now." The warrior hesitated. "Do you want him to die?" she shrieked. "Turn him on his side. Let the blood out." The warrior, convinced, gently, so gently, moved his nephew. Clara, her leg of forgotten, agonizing pain, dragged herself to his chest. She found the entry wound. It was small. The exit wound. There was none. The bullet was still inside, but it was the lung wound that was killing him. "Knife," she said. The warrior handed her his own. "Tala," she whispered. "This will hurt." He looked at her, his gaze weak, but clear. He trusted her. She cut, not deep, just an incision between the ribs, where she knew the lung was collapsing. A dark, frothy rush of blood and air bubbled out. He gasped, a long, shuddering, terrible breath, and then he breathed again. It was not a cure. It was a stay of execution. He was still dying, but he was breathing. The fire was lit. In the new, flickering light, the ruin was a scene from a nightmare. She was covered in his blood. He was pale as the salt flat, and outside, the soldier was still on his knees. "Howard," Tala whispered. Clara froze. "What?" "Bring him." She looked at the uncle. "He wants the soldier." The warrior nodded. Howard was dragged inside, thrown into the dirt at the foot of the tilted cross, near Tala's head. Howard looked at the man he had shot. He looked at Clara, her hands bloody, her face a mask of primal focus. He was seeing a world he had never known existed. Tala's eyes fixed on the lieutenant. The hatred in them was so pure, so cold. It was the only part of him that was not weak. "You came to kill," Tala panted, each word a terrible effort. Howard said nothing. His face was white with terror. "You are a dog," Tala whispered, "a dog that bites for his master." He looked at his uncle. He held out a shaking hand. "My knife." The uncle placed the handle of a heavy skinning knife into his palm. Tala's fingers, slick with his own blood, struggled to close around it. He was a man with 3 catastrophic wounds, 2 of them in his shoulders, but he gripped the knife. With a groan that seemed to tear from the center of the earth, he began to pull himself up, to sit. He was trying to get up, to finish the man who had shot him. "Tala, no," Clara said, her hand on his arm. "He is my enemy," Tala gasped, his eyes locked on Howard. "He is my right." "He is beaten," she said. "He is a prisoner. Look at him." "He shot me." The words were simple. In his world, the logic was iron. "And you are alive." She put her body between his and Howard's. She put her hands on his bare, bloody chest, her thumbs just above the new, terrible bandage she was holding in place. Look at me, Tala." He was forced to. His eyes, full of rage and the fog of death, met hers. "I have seen you," she whispered, her voice frantic, intense. "I saw the man who came back for me in the cave. I saw the man who carried me across the salt flat. That is a man. That is the part of you that I have seen. That is the human part." "He is not human," Tala growled, trying to see past her. "And you, what will you be?" she cried. "If you kill him now, a helpless man. A prisoner, you will kill that part of yourself. You will kill the man I see. He will win. He will have made you a murderer, just like him. Do not let him." The ruin was silent. The other warriors watched, unmoving. Howard was breathing so hard he was sobbing. Tala looked at her. He saw her face, streaked with his blood and her tears. He saw the desperation in her eyes. She was not pleading for Howard's life. She was pleading for his soul. The conflict in his face was a terrible thing to see. It was the warrior of 1,000 years of vengeance fighting this new, strange, terrifying thing. This connection, this wind. His gaze moved from her to Howard. He looked at the trembling, defeated soldier. He saw the piss staining the front of the man's blue trousers. He saw the empty, pathetic fear. This was not a man. This was nothing. "You are not worth the blood," Tala whispered. His fingers, which had been locked around the knife, uncurled. The heavy blade fell from his hand. It clattered onto the stone floor with a final, metallic sound. He had chosen her. He had chosen the human part. It was his last act. The victory, the true victory, was not one of blood. It was one of the spirit, and it had cost him everything. The rage, the adrenaline, the pure force of will that had held him upright. It all dissolved. The life that had been pouring out of him for days finally found its release. His eyes, the clear, black, desert eyes, rolled back. The breath he had fought so hard for left him in a single, soft sigh. He slumped forward. "Tala!" Clara screamed. He did not fall into the dirt. He fell into her. She caught his dead weight, her arms wrapping around his bloody back. She held him. The warriors surged forward, crying out. His uncle moved to pull him away. "No!" Clara screamed, her voice a lion's roar. "He is not dead! He is not dead! He has just lost too much blood!" She held him to her face pressed against his hair, which smelled of smoke and sweat and the desert. "He is alive!" She wept, rocking him. "He is alive." She looked at the warriors, her eyes blazing. "Help me, do not stand there, help me!" She held him, a small, fierce, bloody woman, holding the body of a warrior, in the ruins of a church, and as she held him, the first thin, gray light of the new day began to creep over the broken wall. The long, terrible night was over. It was not a week, it was a lifetime. Tala had not died. The warriors, his uncle, had made a travois. They had moved him, a great bleeding ruin of a man, from the crumbling church. They had taken Howard, his hands bound, his face a mask of gray terror. And they had taken Clara. They had not asked her. They had simply taken her. Her broken leg was a white-hot agony. But they did not care. They had splinted it, roughly, with 2 rifle barrels and strips of a soldier's uniform. They had carried them all back to the place of the fire and the wind. The cave became a hospital. It became a prison. It became the only world. For 6 days, Clara worked. She was the Apache's prisoner, but she was also their only hope. She was the medicine woman. They gave her space. They brought her water and cooked rabbit. They watched her with their cold, black eyes. She had set her own leg, biting down on a stick until she fainted, and then she had set to work on Tala. He was the fire, and he was almost ash. Howard's bullet had torn through his lung, shattering a rib, lodging itself against his spine. She could not get it out. She did not have the tools. All she could do was fight the infection. All she could do was keep the wound clean, keep him breathing, and pray to a god who had long since abandoned this land. Howard was kept at the mouth of the cave, guarded by a warrior. He was in a state of shock. He had watched her, this woman he had known, transform. He watched her work on the Apache, her hands gentle and sure, her face a mask of grim determination. He watched her curse in English and give orders in a halting, broken Apache she was learning from the uncle. On the 3rd day, the uncle had dropped Howard's effects on the ground in front of Clara, his pistol belt, his hat, and a small, leather-bound book, a journal. She had opened it. She had read it. She read of his guilt over the Camp Grant massacre, the orders he had followed. She read of his confused, tormented obsession with her. And she read, on the last page, written in a shaking hand, a full confession of his actions. He had accused Ben Carraway. He had accused his own colonel of signing the illegal bounty papers. And he had written, "I have this day shot the warrior Tala Redhawk in an act of jealousy. Not of duty. I have murdered a man, and I have murdered my own soul." It was a letter. Not to anyone. It was a letter to God, and now it was hers. On the 6th day, Tala woke. He spoke her name. The fever was gone. He was weak. He would live. If she could get medicine, if she could get quinine, if she could get real bandages. She made her decision. She went to the uncle. She held up the book. She pointed to the fort. "I go," she said. He thought she was escaping. He raised his knife. "No," she said. She pointed to Tala. "Medicine. I get medicine." She then pointed to Howard. "I trade him for truce." The warrior understood. He did not trust her, but he trusted her desire to keep Tala alive. He gave her one pony. He gave her a strip of white cloth. She rode out, a woman alone, with a broken leg, her face a ruin, carrying a white flag. She was the ghost of Fort Bowie. When the sentry saw her, he dropped his rifle. He thought he was seeing a dead woman. "Get the colonel," she said. They brought her to the office. It was the same room where Dr. Thorne had reprimanded her. The colonel was there, his face like granite. Dr. Thorne was there, his hands shaking. "Nurse Monroe," the colonel said, "you are under arrest for treason." "No," Clara said. Her voice was thin, but it did not break. "I am not. I am here as an ambassador." "An ambassador from who, that murdering savage?" "From the human race." Clara whispered, "I am here to tell you the truth, and you are going to listen." She told him. She told him everything. She told him about the bounty papers he had signed. She told him about Ben Carraway and the ambush he had helped set. And she told him about the Camp Grant massacre. "These are lies," the colonel said, his face turning a dark, mottled red. "Vile, traitorous lies." "Are they?" Clara said. She reached into her ragged dress. She pulled out the leather-bound book. "This is Lieutenant Howard's journal. He is a prisoner, but he is alive. And this is his full confession. He names you Colonel. He names Carraway. He details the payments. He details the orders. I believe the men back in Washington would be very interested to read it." Dr. Thorne made a small, choking sound. The colonel was silent. He was a dead man. He was ruined. "What do you want?" he whispered. "A truce," Clara said. "You will draw your soldiers back. All of them. Back to the fort. You will declare the Dragoon Mountains off limits. You will rescind the bounty on Tala Redhawk." "He is a killer," the colonel hissed. "He is a man," she said. "And you will issue a new warrant for Ben Carraway, for murder, for the murder of your own soldiers, and for the massacre at Camp Grant." "This is impossible." "It is not," Clara said. "You will do this, or I will take this book to the telegraph office in Tucson, and you will hang." "She had him?" "And," she said, her voice softening, "just a little. I want medicine, quinine, carbolic, a full surgical kit, and food." The colonel looked at her. He saw not a woman. He saw a force of nature. He nodded. "And Howard, send the medicine with one wagon, unarmed, to the spring at Salt Creek. When I have it, your lieutenant will be released." "You have my word," the colonel said. "I do not want your word," Clara said. "I want your signature on the order for Carraway's arrest. Now." He did it. She was released. She did not look at anyone. She walked out of the fort, past the staring, silent soldiers. She was no longer the squaw doctor. She was something else, something they feared. She rode back, not to the cave. She went to the spring. She waited. The wagon came. She took the supplies. She sent Howard back with the wagon. He did not look at her. He could not. She loaded the precious cargo onto her pony, and she rode to the cave. It was empty. Her heart stopped. They had gone. He had died. No. She saw it. On the mesa above the cave. A thin line of smoke. Not a campfire, a ritual smoke. She left the pony. She scrambled up the path, her splinted leg dragging. He was there. He was not in the cave. He was standing. He was in the middle of the mesa. The sun was setting, and it bathed him in a light that was the color of bright new blood, the color of oranges. He was alone. His uncle, his warriors. They had gone. He was wearing only a breechcloth. His wounds were stark and terrible on his skin. He was so thin, a skeleton held together by muscle. But he was standing. He was holding a small braid of sweetgrass. It was smoking. He was washing himself in the smoke. a ritual of peace, a ritual of thanks. He heard her. He turned. They just looked at each other. The silence was vast. It was the silence of the desert, of the sky. She saw the man. He saw the woman. They saw the survivors. He spoke first. His voice was not the rasp she remembered. It was quiet. It was whole. "A man," he said, "can belong to the land. His body is earth. But his heart belongs to the one who made him choose to live." She had no words. The English language was dead. The language of Boston, of the fort, it was useless. She walked toward him. She limped. She did not stop until she was standing in front of him. She could smell the smoke from the grass. She could feel the heat from his skin. He had said his heart belonged to her. She answered him. She reached up. She put her hands on either side of his face, her small, scarred hands on his high, sharp cheekbones. And she pulled him down. She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not the kiss of a nurse. It was a kiss of desperation, of starvation, of survival. It was the first real thing she had done in her life. There was no fear. There were no rules. There was no God. There was only this. Tala was so stunned he did not move. This woman, this wind, she was claiming him. He responded. His good arm, the one that was not shattered, came around her. It was not a gentle embrace. It was an anchor. He wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her so close their bodies slammed together. He held on to her as if she were the only thing keeping him from blowing away. The kiss was not sweet. It was the taste of the desert. It tasted of salt and blood and the bitter smoke of the sweet grass. It was the taste of earth, of dust, of the first rain on dry ground. She was the wind, he was the fire, and they were finally meeting. When she pulled away, they were both breathing hard. The sun was gone. The world was purple and orange. "I brought medicine," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. He laughed, a real laugh, a sound she had never heard. It was beautiful. "You are my medicine," he said. They sat by his small fire as the stars came out. She cleaned his wounds with carbolic acid. She gave him quinine. She worked. He watched her. "What now?" she asked. "My people are gone," he said. "They have taken the truce. They go to the mountains to wait." "And my people," she said, "have cast me out. I am a traitor." "We are nothing," he said. "No," she said. She looked up at him. "We are everything. We are the ones who are still here." She looked around at the high, empty land. "This place, the cave." "It is a good place," he said. "We will stay," she said. It was not a question. "You need to heal. I need to heal." He looked at her. "Stay here." "Here." She touched his hand. "The army is gone. Your people are gone. This land is empty. But people are still sick. People are still hurt. Both sides." He saw it in her eyes. The plan. "A nurse needs a place to work," she said, "and a warrior needs a place to guard." "A post?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "An outpost. Not for the army, not for the Apache, for everyone. A place for medicine. A place for peace." "The Fire and Wind Outpost," he said, tasting the words. "Yes," she smiled. "The Wind and Fire Outpost." He leaned back. He looked at the stars. He was an outcast. She was a traitor. Together they had nothing. And together they had everything they needed. "We will need a stronger roof," he said. The news of the world came to them 3 weeks later, not as a thunderclap, but as a quiet dust cloud. Dita, Tala's uncle, returned. He was not alone. He brought with him an old woman who knew the deep arts of healing, and 2 young boys to hunt. He also brought news. The soldier, Howard, had been returned to the fort. He had not been punished. He had been quiet. But the book, Clara's weapon, had done its work. The colonel had been recalled to Washington in disgrace. A new commander was at Fort Bowie, a man with no taste for scalp bounties. The order for Ben Carraway's arrest was real. It had been telegraphed to every station in the territory. The man was a ghost, like Tala had been, hunted now by his own people. The war was not over, but the truce in the Dragoon Mountains was holding. The army was leaving them alone. Their island, their red mesa was, for a time, safe. And so, the work began. It was not the work of survival. It was the work of living. Tala's body mended, but he was not the man he had been. The bullet from Howard's gun had lodged too deep, too close to the spine, for Clara to dare remove it with her simple tools. It was a part of him, a cold, leaden reminder. His left arm was stiff, his right shoulder, the one branded, was strong, but he was a man who had lived by the perfect, balanced power of his body, and that balance was gone. He could no longer draw a bow. He could not throw a lance. He could, with pain, fire his rifle, but his aim was compromised. The warrior was broken. Clara's leg healed. It healed slowly, and it healed crooked. Her body had been starved, pushed too far. She would walk with a limp for the rest of her life. They were a pair of broken things. They did not stay in the cave. They built from it. The cave of the fire and wind became their larder, their deep, cool pantry. Against its mouth, Tala, with one good arm and a frustration that was a silent, burning fire, began to build a house. He taught the two young boys to make adobe, to mix the mud with the straw. Clara, limping, brought them water from the spring. Tala, the man of the high rocks, the man who hunted, now became a man of the earth. He, the man who had been branded like cattle, now took a spade and broke the ground. He had watched the white men do this and had despised it. It was the act of a farmer, a creature bound to the dirt. But now, he had a new purpose. He was not just planting corn, he was planting a life. He traded the sword for a hoe, not because he was beaten, but because he had something to protect. A garden, a home, a woman. Clara's work changed, too. At first, she was only his nurse. But the Red Mesa was a crossroads, and word spread. The first to come was an Apache woman. She came on foot, holding a child that was burning with fever. She stood at the edge of their small, growing settlement, terrified. She was terrified of the white woman, the ghost who lived with the Red Hawk. Clara went out to her. Tala stood behind her, his rifle in his good hand, not as a threat, but as a statement. He was the guardian of this place. "She is sick," Clara said, pointing to the child. "I am medicine." Tala translated. His voice was quiet. He told the woman that this was the medicine woman who had saved his own life. The mother, torn between terror and hope, let Clara take the child. Clara worked. She gave the child quinine. She bathed him. She sat with him for 2 days, speaking in her soft, Boston-accented English, a language the child did not understand, but in a tone that he did. On the 3rd day, the fever broke. The mother did not leave. She stayed. She began to help Clara cook. Her husband, a hunter, brought them a deer. More came. They were not a tribe. They were the lost. They were the remnants. Apache families who had fled the reservations, who did not trust the new truce. They were outcasts, and they gravitated to the outpost of the 2 great outcasts. Then the white men came, 2 prospectors, their mules loaded, their eyes wild with the hope of gold. They saw the small adobe house, the wisp of smoke. They came for water. They saw Clara. They saw her pale skin, her limp, and then they saw Tala, standing in the doorway of the house. "Well, I will be," one of them spat, his hand moving to his pistol. "It is the squaw doctor and her buck." Tala did not move. His hand, his good hand, was on the handle of the knife at his belt. His eyes were flat. He was the warrior again. He was fire, and he was ready to burn. "Gentlemen," Clara said. Her voice was cold. She stood up from her work, brushing the dust from her skirt. She was not the ragged creature from the desert. She was wearing a new dress, made from calico she had traded for, and she was Again. The lady. You will get your water, and then you will leave. We do not take orders from no traitor, the man sneered. We take what we want. You will not, Clara said. That man, she pointed to Tala, is Tala Redhawk. He is under the protection of the new treaty. And I am under his protection. If you so much as unholster that weapon, he will kill you. And the army, the United States Army, will hunt you down for breaking the peace. Not for killing him, but for killing me. The prospector looked at her. He looked at Tala's cold, promising eyes. He looked at the hard, undeniable logic. He was not a fool. Get the water, Jed, he muttered. They left. They looked back, their faces full of hate, but they left. The isolation was a fortress, but it was also a prison. Life was not easy. The first year, the corn failed. A late frost killed the seedlings. The next year, a drought turned the red mesa into a bowl of red dust. The wind, her namesake, blew for 3 weeks. A constant, whining, maddening storm that tore at the roof and buried their small garden in drifts of sand. They fought. They did not fight with words. They were too close for that. They fought with silence. He would retreat into himself, into the warrior's cold fury. He would stalk the mesas for days, hunting for game that was not there. She would retreat into her work, into her books, into a cold, Boston-bred disappointment. He was a savage. She was a white woman. The gulf between them was, some days, too wide to cross. But the children came, the Apache children, with their wide, curious eyes. They were fascinated by her. Her white skin, her strange, clipped speech, her limp. She began to teach them. She had no school. She had a piece of slate and 3 stubs of chalk. She sat on the ground, under the shadow of the house, and she drew the letters. A, B. They laughed. Tala watched. He sat apart, sharpening his knife, his face a mask. This is A, Clara said, pointing. A small girl with no mother, the one who had come with the fever, pointed at Tala. He has a name, she said in Apache. Yes, Clara said. Tala. Tala looked up. The girl was pointing at the A. Tala, no, he said. He walked over. He took the chalk from Clara's hand. His hand was large, scarred, and awkward. He drew not a letter. He drew a picture. A hawk. Tala, he said, pointing to the hawk. Then he pointed at Clara. Clara, he said. He drew a spiral, the symbol for the wind. The children were delighted. Clara watched him. He had taken her lesson and made it his. He began to teach them the old way. He taught them the language of the pictures, and she taught them the language of the letters. It was a new language, born in the dust of the red mesa. That night the air was cold, the first real cold of winter. They sat inside their small home. It was one room, but it was warm. The fire in the hearth, the one he had built with his own hands, was bright. He was sitting on the floor, staring into the flames. He was quiet. He was always quiet. But this was a new silence, a troubled silence. He looked at his hands. They were not the hands of a warrior. They were stained with chalk. They were calloused from the hoe. Clara came to him. She was tired. She sat behind him, her back against his good shoulder. She did not speak. She just was. She had done it before. It was their ritual. She leaned forward. She rested her chin on his branded shoulder, and she pressed her lips gently to the side of his neck. It was not the kiss of passion. It was the kiss of possession, the kiss of peace, the one that said, "You are here, you are mine, we are alive." He did not shudder. He did not pull away. He closed his eyes. He covered her hand with his own. "The only sin," he whispered, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "What?" she asked. "The only sin I ever committed," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she could not name, "was letting you make me live again." She did not answer. She did not need to. She understood. He was a man who had been born to die a warrior's death. He had been ready for it. He had sought it, and she had stolen it from him. She had given him this hard, complicated, beautiful life, this chalk dust, this failed corn, this woman. She tightened her arms around him. She held the man who had chosen life. Outside, the wind howled over the high, cold mesa. The land was vast and dark and full of ghosts. But in the middle of the darkness, from a small adobe house built against a stone wall, a single, tiny square of yellow light shone. It was not much, but it was a start. It was the simple, defiant warmth of a home. The year was 1882. 10 years had passed. The West was still the West, a land of hard edges and broken promises. But it was also a place where legends were born. Travelers, pulling their mules through the high, empty basins of Arizona, began to tell a new story. They spoke of a place high in the Dragoons, a place that should not exist, an outpost, a sanctuary, run by a wounded Apache warrior and a white woman with a limp who sang old Boston hymns while she set bones. They called her the woman who sings in the desert. They would stumble in, half dead from thirst, and find not a dry rock, but a sprawling, orderly adobe homestead. This was the Wind and Fire Outpost. It was no longer just a cave and a lean-to. It was a long, low building, with a proper roof and glass in the windows, bought with the gold dust traded for medicine. It had a clean infirmary with 2 cots. It had a corral holding 6 strong ponies and a milk cow. And it had a garden, a miracle of green corn, beans and squash, fed by a stone-lined channel that Clara had designed, bringing the water down from the spring. Clara was the heart of the outpost. She was no longer the girl who had fled Boston. Her skin was the color of old leather. Her hands were calloused and scarred, but they were the steadiest hands in the territory. Her limp was a fact, like the mountain, but it did not slow her. She was the doctor, the judge, and the minister for 100 square miles. She had built what she had run away to find. She treated the Apache children for snakebite. She treated the white ranchers for dysentery. She delivered babies from both sides of the old, invisible line of hate in her infirmary. A nervous cavalry private with a broken arm might find himself on a cot next to an old Apache man whose cough was a death rattle. Clara tended them both with the same fierce, non-negotiable compassion. Tala was the bone and the muscle. He was the shadow that guarded the light. The warrior who had been broken was now a leader. He had not regained the full use of his left arm. The bullet, Howard's bullet, was still in his chest, a part of him. But he had found a new strength. He was the chief, not of a tribe, but of this new, strange, mixed-blood family. He no longer taught with chalk and slate. He sat under the shade of the large cottonwood tree that had grown from a sapling he planted 10 years ago. Around him sat the children, Apache orphans, 2 Mexican boys from a broken-down freight wagon, and the pale, freckled son of a prospector who had died of fever in Clara's care. He was their teacher. He would hold up a hawk's feather. "Ki," he would say. Then, his voice a low rumble, he would say, "Hawk." He taught them the legends. He taught them, in 2 languages, the stories of the fire and the wind. He taught them how to read the land, how to find water, and how to set a snare. But he also taught them how to read the white man's letters. Clara taught him to write his name, and he, in turn, taught the children that knowledge was a weapon, but that it could also be a bridge. Life was not perfect. It was still the West, but it was a life. The final test came not from a man, but from the sky. It came in the fall of 1882. A new family, a white family named Miller, had settled in the low canyon. Against Tala's advice, they did not understand the land. The sky turned yellow. It was a strange, sick color. The wind, which had been a whisper, went silent. "It is coming," Tala said. He stood in the doorway of their home. sniffing the air. The big one. It was a great sandstorm, a wall of red dust that blotted out the sun for 2 days. It was a screaming, roaring monster that tore at the roof and buried the world. They huddled inside, Clara, Tala, and the 3 children they had taken as their own, and they listened to the world end. When it was over, the silence was as terrifying as the noise. The land was scoured, new and strange. But the storm was not the end. It was the beginning. The sand had been followed by rain, a deluge, a year's worth of water in 2 hours. And in the desert, water does not soak, it moves. A roar, like 1,000 freight trains, echoed up from the low canyon. "The flash flood," Tala said. He and Clara were already moving. They were a team. He grabbed the ropes. She grabbed her medical bag. The children knew what to do. They ran to the high ground. They reached the edge of the arroyo. It was no longer a dry riverbed. It was a churning, 20-foot-deep river of mud, water, and debris, boulders, trees, and the wreckage of the miller's wagon rushed past. And on a small, shrinking island of high ground in the middle of the torrent was the family, Miller, his wife, and their small son. They were clinging to a single, dying mesquite tree. "We cannot reach them," Clara said, her voice thin. "Yes," Tala said. "We can—" He was the warrior again. He had one good arm, but he had the knowledge. He tied the rope around his own waist. "Hold this." He commanded 2 of his men. He looked at Clara. "When I have them, you will pull. Do not stop. Do not let me go." "Tala, no," she pleaded. "It will tear you apart." "The fire must meet the wind," he said. It was an old joke between them. He plunged into the water. He was not a swimmer. He was a rock, but he was a rock with a purpose. The water tore at him, but he fought it. He used the current. He reached the island. He tied the rope around the woman and the child first. "Pull!" he roared. Clara, her hands raw, her bad legs screaming, pulled. She and the other men, they pulled the mother and child to safety. They were a single, living machine. Tala tied the rope around the panicked farmer. "Pull!" he roared again. They pulled Miller to safety. Now, Tala was alone. The island was crumbling. The mesquite tree was torn away. He was alone in the water. He had no rope. "Tala!" Clara screamed. He was washed away. He was a speck in the brown, angry water. She ran. She did not know she was running. She ran along the bank, her limp gone, her body fueled by a terror that was 10 years old. "Tala!" He had managed to grab a branch, a log. He was fighting, but he was weak. His old wounds, his one good arm, it was not enough. She saw a place where the canyon narrowed, where the water was forced against the rock wall. "Here!" she screamed to the men. "We get him here!" She took a rope. She tied it around her own waist. "Hold me," she commanded. When his log came past, she jumped. She was the wind. She was insane. She left the earth and landed in the churning, cold mud. She grabbed his shirt. She held him. "Pull!" she screamed. They were dragged from the flood, 2 halves of a hole, covered in mud, and water, and blood. They collapsed on the bank, gasping, tangled in each other's arms. He was alive. She was alive. They did not speak. They did not need to. They had saved the world. Again. That night, after the Millers were safe, after the children were asleep, after the outpost was quiet, they did not go to bed. They climbed the high mesa, the place where they had first seen the army fires. They sat, 2 old, broken, beautiful people, and they waited. The sun rose. It was a resurrection. The desert was washed clean. The air was so clear it hurt to breathe. It was a new world. Tala looked at her. Her hair was graying at the temples. Her face was a map of lines. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He took her hand. He placed it on his own chest, over the new, clean buckskin shirt she had made him, over the old, terrible scars, over the bullet that was still there. "The old shaman," he said, his voice a quiet rumble. "He told us that a warrior goes to the happy hunting ground, a sky with no war, a sky with no white men." He shook his head slowly. "The Apache do not believe in your heaven. I do not know that place. But I believe in this place. I believe in the place where you are. That is my heaven." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She had feared God, and she had feared sin. She had broken every rule her old world had set. She had killed. She had loved an enemy. She leaned her head on his good shoulder. She looked at the rising sun. "And I," she whispered, her voice full of a peace that was 10 years in the making, "I believe that God will also forgive those who truly love." He kissed her head. He, the man who had been sin, was now her salvation. As the sun cleared the mountains, a shadow passed over them. It was high, fast, and silent. They both looked up. A single golden eagle was rising from the deep-shadowed canyon. It caught the first ray of sun on its wings. It did not struggle. It just rose. It circled once, over their mesa, over their home, and then it flew straight into the heart of the sun, free. Sometimes, love does not conquer the West. It redeems it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to hear your thoughts. Where in the world are you listening from? Please drop a comment below. We would love to connect with you. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And finally, if you really want to support us, hit that hype button to help this story reach more listeners. We are grateful for every one of you.